Good evening, everybody, and happy holidays. It's Mike Stillman with South Jersey Forward. We're a nonprofit think tank and advocacy organization committed to bold public policy here in Southern New Jersey. And we really have a great discussion for you today about and certainly very important to anybody in the business community, certainly anybody who is looking to grow our economy here in South Jersey. And that's about the banking industry in Southern New Jersey. And we're really excited to have three experts here, and certainly in terms of which one of these does not belong, amongst these three gentlemen, I certainly don't belong, given the breadth of expertise and technical experience they all have. So I really appreciate everybody here joining us this evening. Want to introduce our panelists. Mike Affuso is the president and CEO of the New Jersey Bankers Association. Tony DeSalle is president and chief executive officer of CrestSavings Bank, which is located in Wildwood, and Dave Hanrahan is the president and CEO of Century Savings Bank, located in Vineland. So, gentlemen, I really appreciate you all joining us this evening. Happy holidays to you and your families, and really excited for a very vibrant discussion. If you want to participate in the discussion, please send us your thoughts. Info at southjerseyforward.org, southjerseyforward.org, our website, all social media channels, and at the end of our virtual roundtable, we'll talk to you all about how you can connect with Mike and Tony and Dave. And as I said before we got on, maybe say, you know what, I like those guys. I'm going to give them some of my money to hold on to. So we really want to support our community banking here in Southern New Jersey. So I just want to start off, for laypersons like me, guys, if there's one thing you want laypersons or the general public to know about the banking industry in New Jersey and South Jersey as a whole, what would you say to them? And I'll start with our friend Mike Affuso.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mike, for having us this evening, and certainly appreciate the opportunity here. The thing that I would say is we are diverse and we are poised to meet our customers' needs. And our industry is as diverse as our customers are. So I can tell you that you will have, as a customer, as a bank customer, you will find a bank that will absolutely meet your needs. I know at the shore area, there are very different types of customers at the shore, as in the more inland part of South Jersey. And there's different types of customers in North Jersey as there are in the shore region. I think that's one of the great strengths of our industry is our ability to deliver for our customers. But I'll flip it to our bankers and let them answer that in greater detail.
Tony, what about you? What thing do you want just average Joe or Jane to know about your industry and what you do here in South Jersey?
Sure, Mike, and thanks for having us. I think it's really important for people to understand the impact that community banks can have in economic development. And it's still surprising. I mean, I think a lot of people understand that we lend money, but particularly on the commercial lending side, we can do a lot for customers. And I think many people just assume, we're primarily mortgage lenders. And, while that's true, we do a lot to support small businesses in their development and growth, and really is an engine for the economy.
Now, amen to that. I mean, look, I'll pick on myself. I mean, I think of community bank. Okay, you need a mortgage, you need a business loan, you need a CD, and call it a day. But clearly, that is doing you a disservice. It's much more complex and important than that. And clearly, the imaginations you all have to go through on a daily basis is extraordinary. Dave, what about you? One thing you want the general public to know about your industry and what you guys do at Century?
I wish more people knew what a cool and rewarding profession it is to be a community banker. It's this unique combination of working right in the community where you live, being able to have and see the sort of economic impact that Tony just talked about on businesses and consumers right in your market. You get to meet so many different business owners, get to hear their cool stories, get to look under the hood at their businesses and see how they operate. And you feel really good about the impact that you're having on the community. And because community banks are comprised of small teams of people, if you've picked carefully the people you work with, it's people you like and people who are like-minded about doing things. It's a great profession. I've been at it for decades. I think the same thing is true for Tony, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's great to hear. So let's just jump right into it. So, I'll start with Tony and Dave, and we'll go to Mike. But, Tony, so, give an overview of 2025. Obviously, a lot going on in the economy, not just nationally, but here in South Jersey. How did you guys do? How was the year? What were some challenges? What were some, positive highlights? Just talk to us about how you guys did, certainly as your bank, but overall as an industry in 25.
Sure. I mean, I think it was a good year for community banks in general, especially in South Jersey. I think it was a year where the environment and performance got better throughout the year, and we certainly, I think, as a group, generally did better year over year. I think our customers in general also had a good year. At the shore, anyone at the shore could observe pretty quickly the volume of customers and the volume of visitors was way up this year, and that translated into a good year. And I think most business owners were pleased with it. They certainly are working as hard as ever. But I think in general, the economy and banks, had a nice year.
That's good, Dave. What do you think? What do you think of how did you guys do, and what do you think of the economy in 25 in your neck of the woods?
Well, unless I find a way to screw things up in the few remaining days of 2025, it's going to go down as a very good year for Century Savings Bank. And I think most banks in the state had a solid year. There was some stress in the industry in 2022 and 2023 from rapidly increasing interest rates. And there are still some lingering effects from that, but that's, I'm going to say, mostly abated. There had been a lot of concern about office real estate and other segments of commercial lending and what might happen as rates increased. And thankfully, that really has not materialized. The asset quality metrics of banks across the country and in New Jersey are very, very solid. So hopefully that trend continues into 2026 as well. Of course, none of us knows what's happening with interest rates in the future, but I think most banks are pretty well situated for the uncertainties of whether rates are going down some more, staying where they are, et cetera.
Yeah, talk to us about that a little bit, Mike. Obviously, the Fed recently just announced another interest rate cut. I think 0.25%. I think it's funny. Jerome Powell talks and he moves billions of dollars. Right, that's just the power that the Fed has. Potentially another interest rate cut in 26. I mean, what are you hearing from your members? I mean, to Dave's point, obviously that massive spike the last couple of years. Obviously, you've seen it come down. There's been a lot of debate whether that should come down more or not. But what are you hearing from your members throughout the state on this kind of that state of what the Fed's doing with interest rates?
Well, I think we're looking at interest rates that will sit in the range that they're in right now. I think you're going to see some modest erosion in the labor market. I think you're seeing some data that points to that. As well as some modest increases in inflation. But what I would say is we're just kind of stuck in a range of moderation. You're not going to have the exuberance of rate spikes as you saw or rate cuts as we saw before that. So I think you're going to see in 26 slow and steady. I don't think we're going to see the economy fall off the table, but I also don't see rapid expansion either.
Well, guys, jump in on that. I'm curious to kind of dive into that. Dave, you mentioned the point about kind of real estate and just especially with office space. I know anecdotally, clearly the last couple of years, especially post COVID, the push of working from home and our businesses investing as much as they could or need to, quite frankly, in real estate. But then you have a situation like J.P. Morgan Chase. They spent billions of dollars on this monstrosity or gorgeous building in New York. They want their employees to come back 5 days a week, and they're going to make it as lovely and appetizing for you as possible to do that. What do you see from any of you guys from businesses in South Jersey as they wrestle with that? Even state employees are on a 3-day on, 2-day off, federal employees were brought back. I mean, especially not just from your guys' perspective in the lending industry, but also just from the real estate industry it's kind of a moving target, right? Work from home's in, work from home's out. And, if you have a nice office park in Cherry Hill or Morristown or Linwood, what the heck do you do when you've got changing workers that want to change their habits, or frankly, businesses that may be resistant to that change? So I want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I'll say two things in response to you, Mike. First, as for office, there was a lot of doom and gloom a few years ago about what was going to happen to office. But as it turned out, except for urban city center office buildings, and except for very large single occupant buildings, office in South Jersey has held up really, really well. The operators that we talk to who are landlords and lease 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 square feet units, they've got really strong demand for suburban office. And again, asset quality has held up really good in that sector. And things seem fine. I'll tell you this anecdote, that there was so much doom and gloom amongst everybody, including bankers, in say 2024 about office financing, that a lot of banks pulled their horns back from lending into that space. And as my chief lending officer, Joe Rem, likes to say, he likes to joke, but it's not entirely a joke. When borrowers would call us in 2024 with a office real estate request, the conversation would start something like this: I want to borrow money for an office. Please don't hang up on me because every other bank has. And it created opportunities for a bank like us, probably Tony's too, to do more lending in that space, because we didn't have a concentration of office lending, and we like lending to good operators who have a good project. Now, I will say that was 2024. Here we are in 2025. All of a sudden, the script is flipped, and big banks, regional banks are back into commercial real estate lending. And I would say the competitive landscape is what it normally has been in that space. That's my comment on office. My broader comment about how business owners are doing, they largely seem to have figured tariffs out, or figured it out well enough. The business operators that we lend to are doing somewhere between okay and good. And one of the reasons we like lending to good operators is there's always going to be some vagary that pops up in a business. We want to lend to somebody who can be resilient and figure out their way around such a thing, whether it's a tariff or if it's a pandemic or whatever the next thing is. We like lending to good, smart operators.
It brings up, and guys jump in, but I kind of, in terms of your role in the community, and Mike representing the industry and his role certainly in the community, you're just more than just bankers. You're kind of, and not to, it's going to sound like I'm really sucking up to the panelists, but really community leaders and community partners. Because like Tony, you do a lot of lending to folks in the tourism industry, and I'm sure they just don't. Okay, I need a loan. Buy. And same thing with you, Dave. I mean, they ask you, what do you think? What do you foresee? I joke, you guys, and Mike too, a little bit of therapist, right? Because if I come to you and say, oh, I think it's doom and gloom, then, Tony and Dave, your job is talk me off the ledge. Say, here's why I've been in the industry for decades. Here's where I see 26 shaping out. Here's where I see, commercial real estate happening, things like that. I mean, how is that, Tony, when you've got a business leader who's probably very concerned or apprehensive, and how do you talk them off the ledge, or how do you coach them and kind of provide that relationship, which frankly, the bigger banks maybe not provide. You're just another name in an account, but the Maurice Piers and the boardwalk vendors and stuff like that.
I mean, it's really a fundamental part of our value proposition to customers is, we pride ourselves on being experts in the marketplace. So in many cases, we evaluate and have as customers very similar businesses as to any particular customer. And we spend the time to talk to them and learn about their business. And we're probably also unique when we talk about community bankers that, we're willing to give advice and spend more time. We're certainly also better equipped to give, I'll say, fast and intelligent kind of decisions on, especially particularly with loans. And I think a lot of customers, that usually is a huge undertaking for them, taking a business loan. And we can often guide them through the process and give them suggestions to make the loan, a better fit for them, and hopefully get them to the finish line with it.
Yeah, and how do you deal too, especially with? I mean, look, and I'm glad to hear Dave's that everybody did well in 25, but just obviously the average consumer, affordability's been a big issue, and inflation, and I think anecdotally it seems like folks have not. Maybe to a little bit extent, I'd be curious your thoughts. Curb some of their vacation spending and things like that. I know TSA had a record or close to be a record Thanksgiving for travel and things like that. But are you seeing a little bit of pinch? I mean, or do you foresee that maybe for coming in 26, where someone spent 4 days vacation in Cape May, they pare it back to 2. Families are looking for more affordable options. What are you kind of hearing on the ground, particularly in Atlantic County?
I'd say we're hearing a little bit of all of that. Now, the one thing that's unique about, particularly the Jersey Shore, is we're kind of a generational destination. So you have people who've been coming to the same location happily, literally for generations, and going back to the same kind of either hotel or beach that they went to when they were young kids. And what's also great is the scalability of the vacation. So particularly in Wildwood, we have free beaches. We also have wonderful amusements, and you can take your pick on a given day or in any given really financial situation. You'll see a lot of families adjust the vacation, and maybe they'll, get a slice of pizza and head back to the beach. You can also make the choice to have a steak dinner and go to the water park. So it offers a lot. And with the beauty of our natural resources, people will be at the Jersey Shore. So it's just a matter of not if they're going to spend, but how they're going to spend their money.
Mike, what's fascinating about you and certainly this panel, I mean, what I love doing this is I get, it's an excuse for me to talk to very brilliant people, of which we have 3 right here. But, from your perspective, Mike, as head of the Bankers Association, so you're dealing with just the breadth of diversity, not just in South Jersey, but as a whole. So you're dealing with folks that lend in the tourism and amusement areas, agriculture, financial sector up north, urban areas, not just Atlantic City and Camden, but Jersey City, Patterson. It just, how do you balance all this? You got a lot of competing interests and a lot of great partners, but you got a lot of folks that probably, and frankly, in some respects, competitors, right? I mean, everybody gets along, but how do you balance all that to advocate for your industry in Trenton?
So I think the first thing is we are a member-driven organization. We represent 60 brick and mortar banks doing business in New Jersey. And we have a board of directors, and our board sets the policy. And there are plenty of areas. There are many, many more areas where everyone is in general agreement. They may not be as vociferous as one of their peers, but there are areas of general agreement. So when you look at, where state policy should go or where federal policy should go, generally, there is consensus. And when there is not consensus, we look to build consensus. So, a lot of what I do is to try to identify, fact from fiction, present the board with the facts as we know them, present the board with where we think policy leaders are thinking about going, and try to sculpt the policy and work with leaders to get them where they want to go in a way that's as not as detrimental or as we see now in policy, almost violent shifts back and forth. But we really want to see smooth policy. So hopefully, as we look forward into the new administration, that this administration doesn't merely propose policy as a reaction to federal policy, just because of the political differences in the parties that are running New Jersey versus the United States. I think that's very unhelpful to our industry, and it's unhelpful to consumers. Stability is the most important thing.
So, Dave talked about it, kind of, businesses have kind of figured out tariffs and trade negotiations, and it seems like things are relatively stable, if not at least locally, perhaps not federally. I don't think anyone would say it's stable federally. However, going into 2026, do you guys feel that we have that same confidence of stability? Is it unknown given not just the federal stuff, but to Mike's point, you've got a new gubernatorial administration coming on. You've got a new legislature coming on board. Obviously, challenges in all 6 or 7 southernmost counties. Are we? How are we feeling about 26? Hopefully, cautiously optimistic, hopeful, TBD.
So one thing that makes me hopeful, Mike, about 2026 is what we're seeing right now, what we bankers are seeing right now from the federal banking regulators. There's been some leadership changes at FDIC and the OCC and the Federal Reserve. Those 3 entities set a lot of policy that affect little banks like Tony's and mine. And there have lately been some very community bank friendly changes that have been made. And I'll rattle off 3, if you don't mind me saying.
Please, yeah.
3 specific examples. Number 1, and I'm sorry if I'm going to get too arcane on some of the things I say here, but one thing that's important to a bank is its level of capital that it has to maintain. And our bank has adopted a capital measure called the Community Bank Leverage Ratio. And any bank needs to have capital, but the more capital you're required to have, it limits the growth of the bank and it limits how much lending you can do. The Community Bank Leverage Ratio requirement is currently 9%, and there was just a proposed rulemaking put out a week or 2 ago saying that it may be lowered to 8%. If that's finalized, it's still going to leave banks at an 8% leverage ratio to be really safe and sound and well capitalized. But that seemingly small difference will make a difference on how much Century Savings Bank can grow and how much Century Savings Bank can lend. And that makes a difference to real business owners. So that's one example. Second example is the federal regulators just changed some accounting standards that used to apply to $500 million banks, and the limit was just changed to $1 billion. Well, guess what? For a $650 million bank like Century Savings Bank, it makes a real difference. I feel like a little burden was lifted on me because of that. There's also been a lot of emphasis lately on the federal regulators emphasizing true financial risks when they come in to do examinations, as opposed to a lot of process review. And we haven't yet had a federal examination since the new administration has taken over. I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. But so far, I've seen not just words, but actions that make me think the federal regulators are serious about recognizing the value of community banks and having a bit of a lighter touch on us.
Well, it's good to hear that. I mean, Mike, what are you guys focusing on next? Administration and legislature. Is there anything hot button you're keeping an eye on? Anything you want to pursue, or just kind of, as long as they don't make it worse, we're good, right?
Well, we try to always explain to the legislators that nationally we have a dual banking system, and where the state legislature has its reach is over state chartered banks. But you could create a situation that disincentivizes folks to remain state chartered, and it disincentivizes new bank formation as state charters if they decide to regulate or over-regulate an area more than the federal government is. So, for example, if where Dave is outlining where there's been some relaxation and rules have been made more reasonable, if the state just decides, because they're going to react to something that the Trump administration has done, that's a good idea because that's just what their ideology says, we find ourselves in trouble. But quite frankly, most of our legislators are very mindful of this and don't want to exacerbate a situation where there's a flight to federal charters. and they just want to ensure that our banks are safe and sound and our customers are being served. So as long as we continue to do that, that's really what we try to work with the legislature on. And it's about preventing them from just reacting based upon a press release or something that they see in the press. That's really it's mostly about education.
Yeah, and talk to us, Tony, about how you get or try not to get caught up in that. I mean, I think particularly after the '08 financial crisis, it was, and probably justifiably so, justified to beat up on the big banks.
Mhm.
And how do you and Dave kind of not get caught up in that, or in terms of what Dave's talking about, that federal reform in terms of, I would say, leveling the playing field, because obviously Wells Fargo, Bank of America have a lot bigger pocket than you guys do. But
Sure.
how do you make it a little fairer for the consumer, where the consumer has options, where they're not necessarily, or a business, small business particularly, isn't forced with going with the big banks that don't know your name, or you're just a number on a piece of paper, right? So how do you deal with that in your day-to-day life and your bank, that you're just you're down the street in Wildwood. You're not this big bad oligarchy
Sure.
type bank that has been kind of mystified in the media.
So, the first thing, and we joke internally here, and we say, if you don't embrace regulation, you might be in the wrong business. And the reality is, I mean, we could go on and on about regulation in banks, and I agree with Dave completely that there's more than just an inkling that there's going to be some, I think, appropriate relief for community banks. But the fact remains that regulation can be complex for the banker and for the customer. And I say lending regulations in particular can be hard for a consumer to really navigate in terms of disclosures and some of the fine print. So, again, it comes down to community bank service and being able to help consumers navigate some of the complexity that comes with regulation. It's also critical that we constantly educate our employees to embrace and incorporate regulation into how we do business, into how we provide service, so that really it becomes less of a disruption to the customer and to our operations in general.
I so appreciate your phrasing it that way, Tony, because I think, especially, look, I'm not a banker, obviously, shocker, not, but just in the public policy world, Mike can appreciate this, dealing with all the politicians and I deal with all the time. It seems like it's like a black or white issue, right? It's either let's deregulate everything and make things business friendly, or let's regulate everything and stop business. And it's like, well, there's a sweet spot here, folks, of responsible regulation, but also, to Dave's point, making things just a little bit easier. Not getting rid of everything, but let's go from 9%, 8% ratio, and that could help, somebody expand. That could help this potential hotel project in Ocean City, things like that. So, I think, especially when Mike, he gets a lot of the doom and gloom of, hearing one thing and trying to, I would say lobbyists have to put fires out, right? To, you hear something and it's all over State Street and some shenanigans, and you guys get lumped into something stupid that JP Morgan Chase did, things like that. So I just appreciate how you phrase it, because it's just so critically important.
Mike, I'll add a couple things to what Tony said. Everything Tony said is right. I'll add a couple things, and that is that one of the great things about the banking industry in the U.S. is how diverse the bank mix is. You got the biggest banks, Citi, B of A, Wells, JP Morgan, who can do the biggest things. And we need banks like that. We've got little banks like Crest and Century, and you got banks in between. And that creates a robust environment where, depending upon customer need, they self-select where they want to go. And if somebody wants a bank that has the slickest marketing, that's not Century Savings Bank. If somebody wants a bank that has the latest tech, that's not Century Savings Bank. If somebody wants a bank that has the absolute best interest rate all the time, that's not Century Savings Bank. But if somebody wants a down-home, friendly, reliable bank where they get access to decision makers and no BS in the small business loan process, oh baby, that's us. And that's not for everybody, but it's for a lot of people.
And let me just dovetail onto that, because we do represent J.P. Morgan Chase and some of the larger institutions. You have to think about it this way, Mike. Big projects are financed by big institutions, but a lot of big projects have smaller components, and those smaller components and those smaller contractors are financed by community banks. So you have to think about when you look at South Jersey and you look at what folks are trying to do, whether it's Atlantic City or Camden, you need large institutions to make those types of loans to make those wheels spin, because those are the folks that employ small construction companies, medium-sized construction companies, fabricators, et cetera. So you really have to think about the entire ecosystem, and that you can't have a situation as Dave explains very well, where you turn into Canada, where there are only large institutions, because you won't be able to have that level of high touch, nor will you be able to have institutions that are going to fully understand the very particularized lending and the very particularized customers that I know Tony has and the work that he does with tourism. But at the same token, without JP Morgan Chase, the wheel is not going to spin. And we have to really come to an understanding of that also, because every one of these institutions has a place in the overall market to do the thing that they do. So it's important to have an understanding of that also. You have to remember also the smaller community banks have legal lending limits that they just can't do projects of certain sizes.
Yeah.
So just to kind of dovetail onto the fact that there are all different sizes and flavors of institutions, because there are all different sizes and flavors of customers that need different things from different banks.
I really appreciate bringing that up, and I just picked on that one bit. I don't need Jamie Dimon sending me a cease and desist letter. So we love J.P. Morgan Chase. He's got more lawyers than I do, certainly. But yeah, no, I really appreciate bringing that up, because I think, to Dave's point, everybody, and this is me saying it, not you guys saying it, kind of everybody knowing their lane, right? I mean, all right, Tony and Davey, you're not going to fund the Gateway Tunnel project up north, or you're not going to fund the new convention center in Atlantic City, but if, a hotel the Claridge wants to expand, or if, something in Cape May, then I think you guys are there. Or, even some of the stuff going on in Vineland right now, I know it's controversial with the data center and ancillary businesses that may come off from that. That may be right up in Dave's, wheelhouse. So kind of everybody knowing their lane. To your point, Mike, there's different sizes of pie for everybody's appetite, so to speak, and kind of using that to your members' advantage. Let's talk a little bit about housing, because I know that's been such a hot topic just, in life. Those of us like me who bought during the pandemic, paid a little more inflated price, but, got 2% mortgages or something crazy. Now we've got, I would argue, way more inflated prices and a lot higher, 7, 8, 9%, I guess maybe 7, 8% guys for a typical residential mortgage.
I'd say low sixes today.
Low six. Okay. So at least we're coming down a little bit, but there's clearly been a push. And I think even Mike, we saw in the gubernatorial races, every mad dash to try to just induce more housing, residential development. How we do that obviously is debatable, but just trying to get the barriers to home ownership down, notwithstanding property taxes. That's a whole nother roundtable discussion on that. But what do you guys hear in the house, in the building industry? I mean, clearly, homes are just becoming so much more unaffordable for folks. What role do you guys play? What are you hearing? What do you see as the trend for 26? Talk a little bit about some of your builders and contractors and residential developers. What are you guys hearing out there in your respective worlds?
I'll just jump in real quick with, we are predominantly a 1 to 4 family lender. So, residential mortgages are a really fundamental and critical part of our business. And kind of the national issue that we're having is not going to come to resolution in a very quick manner. And that there's some kind of just structural realities that we all have to face. And, as the Fed's lowering rates, if we've paid close attention, we've seen some of the longer term rates actually go up a little bit. So the mortgage market does not respond. It really has kind of moved in the opposite direction a bit. Another issue that we probably could talk, all day about if we wanted to, is that, projects, for developers are difficult to get off the ground, and not just for the acquisition cost of the land or the buildings. Approval processes are difficult, and getting, projects ready to put, a shovel in ground is a real challenge, and something I think that, on a larger issue, we need government assistance to get that to become more efficient, especially when we're talking about creating the kind of housing stock we need to have any meaningful impact on prices.
Yeah, I know one of the things at the federal level, not so much for residential, but there's been a push, and actually both sides are doing it to kind of reform the NEPA process and those federal environmental reviews. And look, I consider myself an environmentalist. Clearly, we want to do responsible development that doesn't hurt the environment. But if it takes 2 years to do a environmental impact statement, could you get that done in a year or 16 months or something like that? So to your point, Tony, I think it can't just be, well, there's a lot of facets in terms of why we're in this kind of housing shortage that we're in, and it's multifaceted and irrespective of the banking industry. So I appreciate your bringing it up. Any thoughts, Dave, on what you're hearing out there?
No, Tony summarized that well. I got nothing to add.
Oh man, you're killing me, Dave. No, I'm teasing.
I'll jump in on that though.
Yeah, sure. Michael chime in. No, just teasing.
There's a glaring example of this problem in South Jersey. And it's not housing, but it's the regulatory issue. It's the fact that we can't get anything done. How long have we been working on 295 and 42 to make a left? Think about how long that project has gone.
Yeah.
They built the Jersey Turnpike in 19 months from end to end. This is like a 15-year project in order to allow somebody to make a left. That to me, it's right there. It's right there, guys. That is a picture of the problem. Now we could talk about, what are zoning issues with municipalities and the madness of all these different municipalities and different rules. The fact that, building inspectors work when they want to work and they don't show up at jobs when they need to, that slow down the construction project, the construction of individual projects. But I think the key for your listeners is to ask themselves, is that acceptable? Is what's on 295 an acceptable situation? No. And think about the look that gives you into the way the state operates, because that's what it is. And I think it's right there for you. We had it in North Jersey years ago. We had Xanadu there, and that took forever and a day to get off the ground. I mean, it's a glaring picture of failure of a state regulatory process that can't get out of its own way.
So Mike, just to put a humorous bow around what you just said, I was at a Christmas party last night, saw a friend of mine, Jim Kipp, who I hadn't seen in a long time. We were catching up on family. He told me about his 3 daughters and where they are in life. They're all married now. And Jim said the following to me. He said, yep, 3 daughters are married. Now, the last thing on my bucket list before I die is to see the 295-42 construction completed.
No, your guys are exactly right. Even Tony, the Route 55 extension, that's supposed to be done 30 years ago, and still waiting for that.
Another good one, yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder too, especially on the housing front, how you guys deal with it, because it's look, you go where the market is, right? And the market is these, again, as a layperson, these homes are at a certain value, and I think it slowed down from the days years ago where you put a house on the market and you had 15 offers in 24 hours. I think you see some of that. Hopefully, it's not as bad, but sure. Just the bonkers market that we had it, during and right after the pandemic. But how do you look at it where, let's say you've got applications for mortgages trying to help someone buy a house, and it just you look at homes that are selling for X, and 3 years ago they were selling for Y, and you've got to think, okay, well, that's where the market is, but this doesn't add up. I mean, anecdotally, I see on TikTok a lot of realtors using social media to show off homes, and you see the comments of like, well, the home is listed for your $400 home is now listed for $657, and it's like, the heck did that come from? And what does that put you guys in a unique position in terms of you've got to write mortgages for those homes, and even are you looking at this saying this doesn't make a whole lot of sense? But then again, that's where the market is, right? So what do we know?
That really is a big part of it. And as much as we try to educate customers on kind of good credit principles, on how to how to manage their finances and provide the kind of assistance. If the house is out of reach, there's not a whole lot we can do. Now, we are fortunate at CrestSavings and the same with Century that, we are members of the Federal Home Loan Bank in New York, and we have partnered with them in the last year, especially to provide grants to new home buyers. And it literally is we're able to provide free money to buyers who qualify under certain circumstances. And it's a challenge to get them through the process, because in order to buy an average home in Cape May County, the salary really pushes up against the top end threshold of that grant program. So we were very proud to give out several grants in the past year, and we're talking $25,000 to $40,000 individual grants. And there's more money from that source to support housing in our community, but really the value of the home and just the math of the transaction make it very difficult to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure Dave, Mike, you're seeing those difficulties as well. It's just, the hope is this is the start of a conversation. Hopefully it's more nuanced, and policymakers watching this figure like, hey, we've got to do our little part to help. And maybe that's regulatory reform, Mike. And, clearly we're not going to solve it all today. And a lot of it's federal, but, what can we do at the local? To your point, Tony, that kind of that gap where, you're just barely over the limit, but you could still use support. And how do we
Absolutely.
And look, in some respects, it's an arbitrary number, whatever the income, whatever the number is, it's arbitrary, right? You could, if it goes up 10 or 20 grand one way or the other, does it really matter? So how do we kind of fix those sort of things? Well, this has been a terrific discussion. Certainly if there's anything we missed, happy to chat about it, but just, how can folks connect with you guys, your respective organizations, but also, any advice you want to give, whether you're a small business that's, looking to expand their business. You're, like Tony's saying, let's say a couple in their 30s or 40s with young children looking to buy their first home, a little daunted by that. I mean, what do you talk to us about kind of what you would recommend? How can folks get in touch with you? And, what parting words of wisdom would you leave them? Because, I think to your point, Tony, can be very daunting for folks, particularly if you're looking to see some of those assistance programs. And, how do folks, how do you calm nerves of folks, especially like me, who was recently, a few years ago, first time home buyer? How do you calm nerves of folks like that, or small businesses who are looking to expand?
Mike, I'll answer first, if that's okay. And
please,
I'm gonna leave the residential mortgage comments to Tony, because he's far more of an expert in that space than I am. But you referenced small business. I think small business is so in the wheelhouse of community banks that, to answer your question, the small business owner should go to his or her local community bank that is a business lender, meet with a loan officer who's going to give that person good advice and a straight answer about whether their request is bankable or not. And one thing Century and lots of other community banks are good at is giving customized advice to business owners to either say, yes, we can do this, and here's the solution we can customize for you, or no, we can't, and here's why we can't, but maybe we can point you to this resource with the Small Business Administration, or that resource with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, or in my case, in Vineland, to the Cumberland Empowerment Zone, or other local resources that are bespoke to what a particular business owner needs to meet their objectives. My prediction is that a small business owner who finds the right community banker to talk to is going to be hopefully not just offered a solution, but be educated about the options that are out there for them.
Amen to that, Dave. I'll just say, and I know Mike can appreciate this working in the government world. I mean, it's especially, I think, the frustration with, either environmental review or waiting for a permit, or, if you do something that's not, you just hear no, or they move the goalpost. Yeah. So I like the idea, Dave, of, hey, this can't work out. It's like a negotiation. If I can't give you what you want, let me come back with something else. So I appreciate, and I think that's a great asset of you and Tony and all the community banks here in Southern New Jersey, where, it's no buts. Let's try to help you. Let's figure out another path to the destination, not just no goodbye. Which I think that's why people get frustrated with government. Quite frankly, you just hear no. Okay,
Yeah.
well, give me some feedback. What say you, Tony?
I really say the same. I like Dave's suggestion. Just walk in the bank and ask for a loan officer. And really, the branch personnel and the lending personnel are local experts,
Yeah.
and they will they'll get you to the right solution for you. And sometimes that answer is not today. Let's talk in 2 years after you get a little more experience on your belt with your business, and you're able to kind of grow it a bit more profitably. Then we can really make things happen. But having that conversation early and kind of getting, like Dave said, a straight answer really goes a long way. And that's really why we're here.
So Tony, how can folks connect with CrestSavings Bank? How can they find you? Where are you located? Give us a plug.
So our website's fantastic. We always ask people to go there first and kind of learn more about our products and services, find a little bit about security with your finances, and a little bit about what's going on at the bank. Certainly follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and of course, walk right in, please.
There you go. Dave, how about you? Century, we just walking right into?
You're welcome to walk right in or go to centurysb.com. I'll say it again, centurysb.com.
That's great. And Mike Affuso, just say any wrap up about the New Jersey Bank Association. How can folks find you? Sign up for your mailing list. Keep track of what you're all doing in Trenton. Where can we find you?
Absolutely. You can find us on our website, njbankers.com, as well as on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You'll see all the things that we're doing with New Jersey bankers, working with our banks to enhance the economy of the state of New Jersey.
Well, guys, thank you so much for such a fascinating conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really appreciate everybody watching, if not live, but on demand. Certainly, everybody have a safe and happy holiday season. Safe New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and look forward to seeing everybody in 2020.